press play. He's the voice of the intersection of marketing, tech, and popular culture. Thinking is his commodity. DJ, data punk, stylish sock collector, and author of the book Disruptive Marketing. Jeffrey Cologne is your host of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
And if it's Friday, it means it's another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. I'm your host, Jeffrey Cologne, broadcasting from the campus of Microsoft. Hope you had a good week. On this week's episode, we are going to talk about what marketers can learn from the gig economy. How podcasting is actually the best form of native advertising, and some more quotes from our book on inspiration for innovation, right here for those watching the video, and all that and more. So glad to be back for another week. I'm Jeffrey Cologne, your host. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Disruptive FM. Of course, you can follow along with the conversation, or actually be part of the conversation using the hashtag Disruptive FM on Twitter or wherever hashtags are supported. It's always interesting to talk to people about where hashtags are supported, because they're supported on a multiple of platforms, yet Twitter has owned that for a long period of time. It's actually supported on Facebook, it's supported on Instagram. It's an old way of archiving on the web. But shows once again that once a company can own something, they can run with that. So the gig economy, it's here. It's not going away. It's probably one of the reasons that all of us should have a side hustle. I think my side hustle right now is recording these podcasts that maybe 10 people listen to. But hey, if it allows you to figure out where things are moving and how to get stronger in some areas, then I think it's beneficial to be doing those things. I think in this day and age of marketing, if you're not taking advantage of learning and doing, then you're going to be left up you-know-what's creek. So we should all be doing things. We should all be hustling. And one of the things I think marketers are really going to learn from the gig economy is that their customer base is no longer going to be able to be identified through one job title or one position. So for organizations in the enterprise or B2B space, this is going to be quite interesting to watch unfold. Because in the past, you might say, hey, let's go after someone who works in social media, or who's the director of marketing, or who is a creative director. Well, those jobs are sort of going away. They're becoming more freelance oriented. So it might be more difficult to find or connect with those people based on their job title alone, because they may have 3 or 4 different gigs at a given time. I just think that the day and age of, the one gig economy for life obviously is long in the rear view mirror. So one thing marketers can learn from this is, how do they actually find that audience now? Are they going to be able to find them by job title necessarily, or do they really need to target based off interest? This is where I think the interest graph could actually be the most powerful in terms of audience targeting moving forward. We have a tendency of looking at the social graph. We have a tendency of looking at the economic graph. But I think the interest graph might be the one that is unique to us, in combination with some other data factors. Meaning, if we know a person works in marketing, and we also know that they like music, what's the content or communication that you're going to have with that person in order to figure out if they're interested in your service or philosophy or product? Very interesting now that we are not going to be targeted or be able to be targeted based on job titles alone, or jobs alone. I mean, people actually are switching industries constantly. And I think that's going to be very interesting because we've talked for a really long period of time about the era of mobile. And now we have to think about the era of not just mobile as a device, but the era of mobile as, with us as people, so to speak. I mean, we're constantly going to be moving around physically, virtually, from job to job, from geographic location to geographic location. And I say this because there are 3 people now that I just found out who used to live in Brooklyn that are now out here in Seattle. So I must have started a trend a couple of years ago when I realized that, hey, I think I need to make a life change and a career change and see what's going on out there in the Pacific Northwest and sort of this entrepreneurial environment. Not to say that New York doesn't have that entrepreneurial environment. It does. But Tech Alley wasn't what it was in this day and age in 2016, back in even 3 years ago in 2013. There were only a handful of companies that had actually broken through in terms of major funding. Some that actually had undergone IPOs, others that had been acquired. The majority were still really under the radar. So I think if someone had to ask me the question, am I going to be here in Seattle forever? I can't answer that question. I don't think any of us can answer any of these questions. And that's what's going to make it difficult for marketers and what they can learn when it comes to the gig economy. We are not going to have static careers. We're going to be very dynamic, and people are going to come in and out of fields all the time. So what that means, let's say you're marketing a product right now where you feel, hey, I have my base of customers, but I need to go out and find new customers. Well, your base actually may not be your customers that you can rely on in the long run if many of those people actually drop out of the field that they're in to go work in other fields. And that's what the gig economy is going to cause. A cataclysmic shift in terms of we are going to have to be in a perpetual state of marketing. We can never really rest on our laurels. We're going to constantly have to be talking to people. So it'd be interesting. Your thoughts, of course, tweet to me at DJGEOFFE or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Jeffrey with a G, EOFFRUI, last name Colon, COLON. The British phonetic spelling with the Spanish surname. All right, so I've been talking a lot about native advertising for a while with some of my coworkers and people in the industry, and we're always talking about native from a visual standpoint. You go to a website, there's a piece of content there that looks like a form of content, but it's actually a engaging ad, so to speak. Facebook, their promoted posts are really neo-display advertising, if we wanted to give it a term. You're in your news feed, you're looking at content from your friends and family, and you realize, wait a minute, this is a promoted or a sponsored post. The same thing with Twitter, the same thing with all of these platforms. And of course, the original native advertising was search. You'd go search for something, and the search engine results page, the top outcomes of your search were advertising. But now things are shifting. People know and can see those things. They see the promoted posts, the sponsored posts. They can see that something is an ad. And also, many of those posts are still dealing mainly with text or photography. Of course, Facebook's really trying to get into video now and moving more into that area. But how do we actually really get beyond that interruptive feeling from those forms of native advertising. I think one of the ways we get beyond it is we actually move into entire new forms of content that we have not even thought of before as native advertising. And one of them is what we're doing here, what I'm doing on camera, what I'm doing on microphone, and that's podcasting. I think podcasting is the premier form of native advertising now. Because I'm not selling you anything, or at least you don't think I'm selling you anything. I'm really not selling you anything. We're having a chat. That's really what it's about. But we're connecting, and we're connecting on ideas, and maybe I'm building my personal brand. Maybe I'm building a little bit of the brand that I work at. Maybe there's other things that are happening in these areas. But one of the things that we have to think about is podcasting is the best form of native advertising because you can talk about a number of things, and if your audience relates to it, you're not really hawking products. I was actually on a podcast this past week with Rob Greenlee, who works for Spreaker, and big ups to Spreaker. Great product. Using it right now to actually record my podcast. And we were talking about the fact that there are some podcasts that still read what sounds like a 30 or 60 second piece of copy. And I think that'll continue because you're still blurring the lines of the old terrestrial radio ad model into this new form of audio. But I said to him, I think the best form of native advertising in terms of podcasting is what people talk about on their show, and if they actually believe in it, if they're culturally tied to it. And what I mean by this is, if we think about Michelle Phan, and for those who don't know who she is, she created these wonderful YouTube videos where she would put makeup on. She would show people visually how to put makeup on. And she was product agnostic. She didn't hawk for one company or another. I think she got started mainly because she enjoyed cosmetics and enjoyed that industry. And then, of course, companies said, hey, wait a minute, is there any way that we can give you some fresh new products and you'll maybe incorporate them into your video? And she said, yeah, as long as I actually enjoy the product. I'm not going to talk about something I don't enjoy. And that's very natural. That is something that is authentic. That is what's missing from most advertising and most marketing. That voice of authenticity. If you're a toothpaste company and you came to me and said, "Hey Jeff, I'll give you $1 million to talk about our toothpaste to the 10 listeners of your show," I'd probably decline taking that money because I don't want to get behind a product that I don't believe in, philosophically, culturally. And there are some organizations I would actually go to and say, "Hey, you don't have to pay me anything, and I'm going to talk about you because I actually care about your causes. I care about your services. I care about your solutions." I mean, I'll name some of those right now. Human Rights Watch, great organization, support it all the time. I think, they don't have to give me money. I'm going to talk about them regardless because I culturally identify with them. I think we need organizations like that in the world. The Anti-Defamation League, we need organizations like that in the world. I'm going to get a little political, and some people might say, oh no, he's going off the deep end. But the entire Black Lives Matter movement, I'm going to talk about that because I've been talking about that forever on Twitter and on this podcast because I believe in that. So none of those organizations are ever going to have to give me an exchange of money because I'm going to happily talk about them. I actually identify with them. And the same thing is true with some products. I think I can say that I'm, a firm believer in some health products. I like the Microsoft Band. Yes, I happen to work at Microsoft, but I think it's a good product and it helps me track my sleep and my steps. So those are things that, I'm happy to talk about some things on this show, and I think when you incorporate that, obviously weave that into a narrative, what you get is more authenticity. And I think that's where we're headed, and I think that's why podcasting is the most native form of advertising, so to speak. All right. Imaginative, innovative, and inspired. Some quotes to leave you with for this week's episode. And we'll continue to do this because I really want to leave everyone who's listening to the show inspired to do some wonderful things. So let's read a couple from the book. Begin and you are halfway there. Change is the only constant. Life has no romance without risks. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. And this one that I really love from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Questions, comments, collaboration. Let's keep the dialogue going. Hashtag Disruptive FM. Tweet to us at Disruptive FM. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and YouTube. We sort of fragment the show and put it everywhere because, like I said, that allows us to get the 10 listeners out there that listen to this show. Hey, it's all learnings, right? That's what marketing's about. We're learning we're learning by doing. Let's keep the dialogue going. You can find us on all those mediums, and of course, we look forward to chatting next week on another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Jeffrey's latest book, Disruptive Marketing, on Kindle, hardcover, and audio. Signing off from the city of Seattle. Press pause.